Hello, I'm Morris Ruddick. This is the fourth in a series about the Joseph calling. I spent 30 years operating a small planning and research consulting firm that served as my platform for kingdom agendas. I served a unique client base that ranged from Fortune 500 companies to the U.S. Postal Service to several of the most respected ministries operating during our day. When I speak of an interlinking between business and the kingdom, it's just not a premise underscoring the role of the Josephs of our era. It is the very foundation to the way that I operated my own consulting operation and ministry. Within that context, there have been more than a couple of Joseph-type projects that I have actively been involved in. One involved helping a group of persecuted believers to establish a means of supporting their community in a situation where the persecution of believers in their nation created serious economic constraints upon this particular ethnic group. Prudence does not allow me to share much more than that. But the other project is one that I can share about. The Joseph Project in Israel is an outgrowth of the needs developing from the persecution of the Jewish people in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. Recent upswings in anti-Semitism and persecution, together with significant economic and political upheavals in the former Soviet Union, created a growing exodus of these dear persecuted folks immigrating to Israel. Many are arriving with only what they can carry. The Joseph Project task has been to establish and prepare in advance relief and distribution centers that will provide basic humanitarian aid and relief for the persecuted Jewish immigrants arriving in Israel. But the opportunity extends beyond assisting refugees with the needs of food, clothing, shelter, and employment. This Joseph Project is an outgrowth of a kingdom opportunity created by the impact and discontinuities of our day. These are times of unprecedented change, and during these times there will be Josephs all over the world who are called, anointed, and prepared by God, who will be at the leading edge of the power curve of the change. Modern day Josephs who understand the times and know what to do, who will be the gatekeepers into alternative economic structures, gatekeepers who will serve to open doors for opportunities to serve and to bless God's people and those around them that would not be opened otherwise. Allow me to illustrate from Joseph's life just what the Lord's people can expect when God is orchestrating significant change, and in this case, during a time of famine. It is written, "Now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine." The land languished because of the famine. That word languish is very strong. The dictionary defines it as to become weak or feeble, to lose its strength and vigor, to exist or continue in miserable or disheartening conditions. It is written, "Then Joseph brought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his field, because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's." So the people of Egypt went to Joseph, and he bought what they had and gave them sustenance in return. In the process, he kept them safe, and he kept them fed. The scripture continues by saying, "Then Joseph said to the people, 'Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it came to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field, and for your food, for those of your households, and for food for your little ones. This is the time following the famine. So Joseph not only fed the people, but he kept the economy alive. He orchestrated the restoration that was needed when the crisis was over. The verses to this point deal with the general population under Joseph's charge. But what is significant is what was happening to God's people during the same time. The answer is in Scripture, where it says, "So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and they grew, and they multiplied exceedingly." Something unusual was happening in the midst of this severe famine. A famine so severe that it was said that the land languished. And this something unusual was the fact that God's people had possessions and were multiplying exceedingly. The psalmist illustrates the principle operating here for God's people during times of duress, times in which the world is under distress. It says, God's people, the righteous, the chosen, are not put to shame in evil times. In the days of famine, they will have abundance. Understanding the times and knowing what to do. There is indeed radical change coming to the earth. But the message from the Lord is this: He is sending His emissaries ahead so that the body will be prepared. Marketplace leaders will have a responsibility of recognizing and supporting and networking with what is taking place and with the people that God is putting together in alliances. Things are going to be different. It's going to be a time in which those who are called, anointed, and prepared will be used in unusual ways as Lord brings about the greatest outpouring of His Spirit that the world has ever seen. In some respects, it will be more of a new thing. More of the same harder, and business as usual will no longer be enough. It is certainly going to involve much creativity in innovation, but it's going to be creativity and innovation based on hearing from the Lord, not based on clever schemes, new approaches, discoveries, mechanisms used for God's purposes that will very often reflect simplicity, availability, and reflect factors heretofore overlooked. It will involve a transfer of wealth being better defined as resources. There are going to be incredible investment and resource generation opportunities, witty inventions and ideas, disruptive technologies that create new opportunity that the Lord will reveal and entrust to servant leader administrators that He has called and prepared. And it will involve unusual networking of strategic alliances, networking that will include layers and networks. I am convinced that in the days ahead, there are going to be many, many unusual open doors of opportunity that result from unusual alliances. Open doors to releasing independent global media systems, to influencing secular rulers and leaders of the world, to providing private communication infrastructures that instantaneously link leaders and special groups from all over the globe, to providing favor and strategic alliances with the pharaohs and King Cyruses of our day, to being the catalyst and mechanisms in creating new, innovative means to fund initiatives that strengthen Israel, and of transferring the enormous levels of resources needed to build the infrastructure in support of God's kingdom purposes, to strengthening the persecuted segments of the body, to providing synergies which open doors for new opportunities in the area of funding, facilitating, and influence that will initiate restoration in Israel, bless God's people, rescue the perishing, and impact the course of world events in a time of crisis. As these tasks are accomplished, it will change the course of nations. Changing the course of nations, the Josephs of today are already being used in this way. Today there are groups of Josephs who are playing significant roles as advisors to heads of states. Some heads of states who deeply desire to see their nations and their people to be extracted from the cycles and clutches created by the evil and crisis so rampant in the world. Heads of states who desire to see their nations used for the Lord's purposes. In our next session, we'll be discussing the need for new mindsets that set the stage for strategic alliances. And this is Morris Ruddick.